The true omen of disaster wasn't the pickup's asthmatic cough, a rasping death rattle against the wind. Nor was it the sleeting rain, transforming the desolate stretch of California Highway 99 into an obsidian maw, hungry and indifferent. It was the sharp, percussive whip-crack echo that sliced through the storm's roar metal, fatiguing under relentless strain, then shearing with a horrifying finality. The truck's rear axle, a topography of rust and neglect, groaned its terminal complaint. Lillian Martin's knuckles, bone-white on the bucking steering wheel, clenched with a desperate strength she didn't know she possessed. "Hold on, girls," she screamed, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind's banshee shriek and her daughter's terrified cries, a sound that tore at the fabric of her already frayed nerves. Just days before the final exquisitely cruel letter from the Holbrook San Francisco law firm, embossed with their insufferable family crest, had arrived. Ms. Martin further refusal to cede guardianship of the children, Lucy Grace and Lily Martin, to their paternal grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Charles Holbrook, will result in immediate legal action. We have compiled a substantial evidentiary portfolio detailing your manifest unsuitability as a primary caregiver. Consider this your final non-negotiable warning. That chilling, legally couched ultimatum, coupled with the insidious whispers of her instability and erratic behavior that had hounded them from their last rented room in Bakersfield, had pushed them to this desperate, ill-fated flight north. She could still feel the paper's chill smell, the expensive ink, a stark contrast to their pervasive poverty. Their rusted sanctuary, affectionately nicknamed the Wanderer, slewed violently across the slick asphalt. 7-year-old Lucy, ever the stoic, instinctively grabbed for 6-year-old Lily, her pigtails flying, who narrowly missed cracking her head on the dashboard's peeling vinyl. Grace, Lucy's twin, a mirror image, with eyes wide with a more palpable fear, trembled beside her lips, moving in a silent, fervent prayer her grandmother, David's mother, ironically had taught her long ago. They were fleeing not just vague misfortune, but the tangible, suffocating threat of David's overbearing, powerful family. The Holbrooks, wealthy orchard magnates with tendrils of influence stretching throughout the Central Valley and beyond, had made their intentions brutally clear. They would stop at nothing to gain custody, painting Lillian as unfit, unstable, a grieving widow, incapable of providing simply because she was poor and heartbroken and refused to be a puppet. The Ridgemont Estate palatial home to Alistair Weston, a reclusive philanthropist, according to a tattered, hopeful newspaper clipping Lillian kept tucked in her worn purse, was their Hail Mary destination, a fragile flicker of hope against a tsunami of despair. Now this metal-rending, hope-shattering catastrophe. With a final sickening lurch, the pickup plunged into a muddy, reed-choked ditch beside the highway. Headlights already dim winked out. Silence, absolute and terrifying, descended, broken only by the relentless hammer of rain on the truck's dented roof. "Mama, the bad trees are watching us," Lily whimpered, her small voice trembling. Lillian, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, twisted in her seat, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by maternal terror. "Girls, Lucy, Grace, Lily, are you hurt?" Shaken, soaked by icy water, seeping through a rusted door seal, but miraculously physically whole. Her hope, however, lay shattered and bleeding with the broken axle in the cold California mud. Before we delve deeper into the extraordinary events born from this calamitous night, if stories of quiet heroism emerging from the crucible of hardship, of second chances arriving on the wings of near despair, and of transformative love speaking to the deepest chambers of your heart resonate with you, I invite you to subscribe to our community. Let's walk this path of shared resilience and discovery together. Now let me illuminate what truly happened when one steadfast, unwavering porch light refused to yield to the encroaching darkness. The porch light at Zachariah Cole's mountain cabin had burned for 7 relentless, unyielding years. It had transitioned from a forgetful habit in the immediate, bewildering aftermath of loss to a sacred, poignant ritual, a silent, incandescent promise against the suffocating, solitary darkness that had become his life. After Caroline, his vibrant, loving wife, and their newborn son, baby Andrew, were stolen from him. By a sudden, cruel twist of fate, he'd irrationally, stubbornly left it burning, a desperate, illogical conviction that they might somehow see its faint glow from wherever they were and know he hadn't forgotten. As his daughter Emily, a tiny, resilient miracle, grew from infant to child to young woman, it became a practical beacon, guiding her home from school bus stops on darkening winter afternoons. Now, with Emily away at college, forging her own path, the light was simply Zach. An externalized extension of his wounded, persistently beating heart, a lantern, he often thought, with a wry, private melancholy, for lost souls. He rarely admitted even to himself precisely whose lost souls he still believed were wandering in the shadowy periphery of his existence. Every evening, without fail, Zach traversed the familiar creaking floors of his weathered mountain cabin, the comforting scent of old cedar wood smoke, and a profound, bone-deep loneliness his constant shroud. He'd flick the switch by the door, and its amber glow would spill out onto the porch, a stark, defiant contradiction to the cold, indifferent starlight, painting the surrounding pines. It became a local legend in their small Sierra foothills community, Old Man Cole's never-ending light. Some newer to the area linked it to romanticized pioneer tales of guidance and rescue. The old-timers, those who remembered Caroline's infectious laugh and Zach's easy smile before tragedy, carved new lines onto his face, simply nodded with a sad, knowing understanding. Legends whispered around campfires during the annual Mountain Laurel Festival even hinted it held a subtle magical quality, that it guided not just the physically lost, but those whose spirits were adrift, those needing desperately to be found. That early December evening, the wind clawed at the eaves of the cabin like a restless spirit. Dry leaves, remnants of a golden autumn, skittered across the porch boards with a frantic whispering dance. Zach pulled his threadbare patched jacket tighter around his lean frame, a well-used coffee thermos clutched in one calloused hand, his trusty toolbox in the other. A burst pipe up at the Henderson farm, old man Henderson too frail now to manage such repairs himself. Money was critically tight. Overdue property taxes gnawed at him, and Emily's college tuition fees loomed a constant, anxious pressure. These inconvenient, often cold, late-night jobs were the literal lifeblood that kept his own lights on and Emily's dreams alive. As he passed his groaning, unlatched wooden gate, a sound snagged his attention, cutting through the wind's howl, crying. Soft, fragile, heartbreakingly young. He stopped to boots crunching on the gravel drive, his gaze sweeping the stormy, rapidly deepening dusk. And then he saw them. 3 little girls, spectral figures, bundled in wholly inadequate threadbare sweaters, huddled like frightened sparrows outside the imposing black wrought iron gates of the Ridgemont estate. The youngest clutched a tear-stained, crumpled letter. They stared, small faces upturned, at a blinking red security camera mounted on a stone pillar, then at the resolutely closed, ostentatious gate, then towards a sleek black limousine purring its way down the long tree-lined driveway from the mansion, its powerful engine a dismissive, contemptuous growl. A tinted rear window glided smoothly up, sealing the occupants within their bubble of oblivious privilege and expensive perfume. The girls slumped, a collective sigh of desolation escaping their small forms. His boots crunched with more purpose now. "You girls okay?" he asked consciously, softening his usually gravelly voice, a tone honed by years of too little use. Mud caked their worn, inadequate shoes. A violent tremor racked their small limbs, not just from cold, but he sensed from sheer terror and exhaustion. Lucy, freckles like scattered cinnamon dust across her determined face, looked up, her eyes unsettlingly old and weary in such a young child. "Our mom's in the truck, down there," She pointed a trembling finger towards the inky blackness of the ditch, where an old red pickup lay askew like a discarded broken toy, almost invisible in the shadows and overgrown reeds. It broke. She's real sick, mister. We tried to ask Mr. Weston for help, showed his driver Mama's letter, but he said Mama was probably just another grifter trying to get money. He called her damaged goods. Her small voice vibrated with a fierce protective anger that resonated deep within Zach's own guarded heart. Zach's throat ached with a sudden familiar tightness. Damaged goods. The callousness stung. Where exactly is your mom, show me? He hadn't noticed the pickup camouflaged by the gloom and dense foliage. A woman was slumped behind the wheel, ghostly pale, and still under the failing flickering interior light. Ma'am, he said gently, tapping her shoulder. She stirred, a soft, pain-filled moan escaping her lips. Her eyes clouded with profound fatigue and searing pain fluttered open, struggling to focus. We didn't mean to bother anyone. She rasped, her voice hoarse and weak. The Holbrooks, David's parents, they said they'd find us if we asked for help from anyone official. A racking, body-shaking cough seized her, doubling her over. He reached out, touched her forehead. Dangerously hot. You need help, he said, his voice now firm, all hesitation gone. You're burning up. His own past losses, the ghosts of Caroline and Andrew, surged within him, transforming into a resolute, protective anger. Come on, girls, he said gently, but with undeniable authority. Let's get you all somewhere warm, somewhere safe. I kept that light on for years, tending my own ghosts. Maybe it was waiting for the living all along. 15 minutes later, they were huddled on his braided rag rug in the living room, wrapped in Emily's old brightly colored fleece blankets, clutching mugs of sweetened warm milk. The fireplace, an old stone behemoth, crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. He'd even managed to find a forgotten, slightly stale packet of chocolate chip cookies in the back of a cupboard. Lillian, she'd whispered her name in a faint, tremulous voice, rested fitfully in his oversized, worn leather recliner, a damp cloth on her feverish forehead. Cal, the adventurous calico cat, who'd brazenly adopted him a few weeks prior, seemingly sensing the distress, had curled up at Lily's small feet, purring like a tiny motor. Why Ridgemont? Zach asked quietly, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb Lillian. Grace, her eyes large and luminous, fixed on the mesmerizing flames, replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama read in an old newspaper that Mr. Weston sometimes helped families in trouble. Real trouble. We thought if he just read our letter, our special letter, he would understand and help Mama get better. Lucy, ever practical, retrieved the hopelessly creased, tear-stained and mud-smudged piece of paper from her pocket. In earnest, heart-wrenchingly childish handwriting, it read, Dear Sir Mr. Weston, we hope this letter finds you well. We don't want money, not really. We just need a safe place for our Mama to get well. She's very sick, and the doctors in the last town said she needs rest and medicine. We can help clean your big house or do chores in your garden. We are very good helpers. Please don't call the police or those bad men, the Holbrooks. They want to take us away from Mama. We're good girls, honest. Love, Lucy, Grace, and Lily. 3 lopsided, brightly colored crayon hearts followed their names. Zach couldn't speak for a long moment, a painful lump constricting his throat. They wrote that themselves. Lillian, her eyes still closed, managed a faint nod, fresh tears slipping from beneath her eyelids to trace paths down her temples. I didn't know until Lucy showed it to me when we were almost there. I would never have allowed them to humiliate themselves to beg. I used to be a teacher, you know. 2nd grade. I loved it. Then David. David died. Everything just fell apart. The Holbrooks, his parents, they don't want the girls because they love them. They want them as possessions, as symbols to erase me, to erase David's choice to love me. Zach understood that cruel, insidious brand of disaster, the kind that creeps in and dismantles a life piece by piece. Years ago, he'd watched Caroline fade, her vibrant life force dimming with each passing day. He'd held baby Andrew for 12 impossibly short, precious hours. The porch light had stayed on ever since a silent sentinel. As the girls, exhausted but finally warm, drifted to sleep on the rug, their breathing soft and even, and Lillian whispered a broken, "Thank you. You don't know what this means." Zach stepped out onto the porch. Snowflakes large and fluffy had begun to fall, a silent benediction blanketing the dark woods in a pristine layer of silver. He looked at the steady amber glow of the light. Maybe it hadn't just been for those lost souls from his past. Maybe all this time it had been guiding new wounded souls home. The next morning, a soft, gentle rain drummed a soothing rhythm on the cabin roof. Zach stood at the window, a mug of cold coffee forgotten in his hand, his gaze fixed on the 3 little girls cocooned like butterflies in blankets on his couch, and Lillian still pale, but breathing more easily in his recliner. This wasn't just unlike him. It was a profound aberration from the carefully constructed solitude of his recent life. But their raw, unvarnished desperation, their quiet, resilient dignity, had somehow cracked the formidable wall he'd built around his heart. Lillian appeared in the doorway, enveloped in one of his large, faded flannel shirts, looking small and vulnerable. "I'm so terribly sorry for this intrusion, Mr. Cole," she began, her voice still husky. "You're not intruding, Lillian. And it's Zach," he said, simply turning from the window. "Coffee fresh, pots on." A faint, weary smile touched her lips. She sat at the scarred, rustic kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the mug he offered. "Do you live here? All alone?" She asked, her gaze taking in the neatly kept but undeniably solitary space. Zach nodded, his own gaze drifting to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, him younger, beaming with a vibrant, laughing Caroline, her arm linked through his Emily, a baby on her lap. "Mostly. Since Emily went off to college. She's a smart girl, stubborn as a mule, gets it from her mom." "You raised her by yourself?" she asked, a note of awe in her voice. "Not by choice." He admitted the old pain, a familiar ache. "Caroline. She passed. Complications during childbirth, a sudden embolism. Emily, she made a tough little scrap. Our boy Andrew, he didn't. Lived just 12 hours. Oh, Zach, I'm so deeply sorry." Lillian whispered, her eyes mirroring a familiar sorrow. He managed a thin, sad smile. "Life, huh? Some things just don't ask for permission to keep dragging their sorry selves along." She nodded, understanding dawning. "I was married to David, a builder, a good man with big dreams. We had such plans. A rundown Victorian farmhouse just outside of Fresno. We were renovating, pouring all our sweat and love into it. He died in a freak crane accident on a construction site 6 months before the girls were born." Her voice faltered. "Triplets. The doctors called them our miracle babies. And you raised triplets, all alone." He asked, the sheer magnitude of her struggle hitting him. His parents, Charles and Alara Holbrook, they offered support. But it came wrapped in barbed wire and conditions. They claimed I was emotionally unstable, unfit, overwhelmed by grief, which God knows I was, but not incapable. They hired lawyers, private investigators, who shadowed my every move. They said I deliberately turned down their generous financial support, which was entirely conditional on me, relinquishing all significant parental decisions to them as proof of my willful neglect and irresponsibility. "So you fought them?" Zach stated, a note of respect in his voice. With every last shred of strength I had. They retaliated, cut me off from any potential family trust David might have left, though he died intestate. Whispers followed me. I lost my teaching job due to concerns about my focus. Rent piled up, utilities were cut, everything just cascaded. They deserve so much better than this life on the run. Her voice choked, and then she looked down at her chapped hands. Zach studied her. Thin from sacrifice, not vanity, her hands eloquent with hard work, her eyes holding a deep-settled exhaustion, but also a flicker of unyielding fire. You're doing a hell of a lot better than you give yourself credit for, Lillian. He said quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle. You didn't give up on them. That counts for a hell of a lot in this world. Outside, watery sunlight, pale and hesitant, began to push through the dissipating clouds. A moment later, soft giggles emerged from the living room. Lucy peeked around the doorframe, a toothbrush with far too much toothpaste foaming in her hand. Mama Lily says the squirrels are having a breakfast party. Lillian let out a laugh, a rusty, unused hinge slowly giving way to something like joy. She's the loud one, our Lucy. Grace worries about everything and everyone. Lily talks to birds, clouds, and apparently party-going squirrels. Zach found himself chuckling, a sound that felt foreign yet welcome in his own throat. They seem like good kids, resilient. They are, Lillian said, that fierce, protective fire rekindling in her eyes. They're amazing. Just born into a storm they didn't create and don't deserve. We'll try to head out this afternoon, Lillian said later, a renewed anxiety tightening her voice as the practicalities of their situation resurfaced. There's a shelter in Stockton, I think. If the truck can be fixed, or if there's a bus. You don't have to rush off, Zach replied instinctively, the word surprising even himself. Roads will still be slick, treacherous in places. The girls need more rest, a few more warm meals. You do too. I can't impose any further, Zach. She said, a flicker of pride, or perhaps fear of further obligation in her voice. You're not imposing, Lillian. She studied him, then her gaze searching, assessing. Just one more night, then, she whispered, as if testing the waters. If you're absolutely sure. Just one, he echoed, though a deep, unfamiliar intuition rumbled within him. It wouldn't be just one. That afternoon, the girls, armed with a precious pack of crayons Zach unearthed from Emily's old art supplies, taped a colorful drawing next to the porch light. It depicted a giant, smiling yellow light bulb radiating warmth with 3 small stick figures holding hands beneath it. Underneath, in shaky crayon letters, it read, "Thank you for keeping your light on, Mr. Zach. We saw it shining through the scary dark. Love, Lucy, Grace, and Lily." He stared at it, a familiar tightness gripping his throat. But this time it wasn't just sorrow. For so many years, that light had been a beacon of his grief. Now it felt like it meant something more, something vibrant and alive. That night, a bone-chilling drizzle returned, a mournful counterpoint to the earlier hope. Zach moved around the cabin, latching shutters, a primal forgotten comfort in preparing the house against the elements for others, not just himself. The fireplace cast warm, dancing shadows on the log walls. Lillian sat on the hearth, gently combing Lily's tangled, damp hair with her fingers. He watched them from the kitchen doorway, the domestic scene achingly, beautifully perfect. "Can I get you anything, Lillian?" he asked softly. "Actually, a glass of water would be wonderful, thank you." As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed. A small, unexpected spark, a tiny jolt of awareness passed between them. She looked around the cozy room, her gaze lingering on the hand-carved bookshelves, the worn quilts, the framed photos. this place. It feels like someone used to love it very, very much. And perhaps, she added, her eyes meeting his, still does in a different way. He was surprised by her perception. It's the carefully chosen, well-loved things, not grand, but treasures, tokens of someone still holding on, still cherishing. He swallowed a lump in his throat. That's mostly Emily and me. And Caroline before. That carving there. He pointed to a rough-hewn wooden trout. Emily did that at summer camp. Miller's Creek. She caught her first real trout there. Named him Trevor, then cried when we cooked him. Lillian smiled a genuine warm smile that reached her tired eyes. Impulsively, he rose and went to an old cedar chest in the corner, retrieving a small, plain wooden box. He brought it back to the hearth. Inside, nestled on faded cotton wool, lay a pale blue, knitted baby blanket, impossibly tiny, and a small yellowed hospital ID bracelet, Baby Boy Cole. This was Andrew. He said, his voice thick. He lived for 12 hours. Caroline died later the same night. A blood clot, they said. Sudden, no warning. Lillian's eyes welled with tears. She didn't offer platitudes, just sat beside him on the warm hearthstones, a silent, profound communion of shared sorrow passing between them. I kept the porch light on. Like maybe if it was bright enough, they weren't truly fully gone. Like they could find their way back if they wanted. I had something like that, Lillian whispered, reaching into her purse and pulling out a crumpled, worn ultrasound photo. Triplets. The technician was so excited. I'd look at this especially when I was asking for help at food banks or trying to sleep in the truck in some Walmart parking lot, terrified someone would report me. It reminded me why I wouldn't ever give up. Zach peered at the blurry image of 3 tiny curled forms. You did all that by yourself, he murmured, a sense of awe coloring his voice. For them, I'd do it all again 1,000 times over, she said, her voice fierce with conviction. But I'm tired, Zach. So incredibly tired of having to be strong just to survive every single day. Maybe, he said, his voice gentle. It's time someone helped carry that considerable weight for a while. Her eyes, pools of shimmering blue in the firelight, searched his fear and a fragile, burgeoning hope warring within them. Why us, Zach? Why are you doing this? We're strangers. He stared into the hypnotic dance of the flames. Years ago, right after I lost them, an old neighbor, Miss Clara, a wonderful woman, she helped me. Didn't say much. Just brought over soup, sometimes a pie. Sat with me in the silence. One day she said, Zachary, when the house feels too dark, too empty, you leave a light on. Not always for others, mind you. Sometimes it's for yourself, so you can find your own way back home. I didn't really understand it then, not truly. Not until now. Lillian exhaled a shaky, shuddering breath. And what if the light doesn't bring the past back, Zach? What if they're really gone? Then maybe, Zach said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, it brings something new. Something or someone you didn't even know you were waiting for. Her face softened, a fragile relief, smoothing the worried lines around her eyes. That night, Lillian slept in Emily's childhood room, a small comforting space under the eaves. Zach lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the old house, no longer empty, but expectant. Full. Strangely, wonderfully full. Morning brought the unexpected, glorious smell of pancakes and the sound of unrestrained giggles. Lucy, brandishing a spatula like a dueling sword, was attempting to flip pancakes with more enthusiasm than actual skill, sending a few askew onto the stovetop. Grace, a tiny, meticulous drill sergeant, was carefully setting the table, ensuring each fork and knife was perfectly aligned. Lily, humming a cheerful off-key tune, was sharing a piece of bacon with Cal the cat. Lillian, looking more refreshed than he'd seen her, a faint touch of color in her cheeks, smiled from the doorway. They insisted on making breakfast. Apologies in advance for the state of your kitchen. Zach laughed, a rusty, surprisingly joyful sound. Smells like a 5-star culinary success to me. They stood for a moment, shoulder to shoulder in the small kitchen, an unspoken camaraderie, a fragile sense of belonging blossoming between them. After breakfast, the sun finally broke through in earnest, chasing away the last vestiges of gloom. Fog curled like ethereal ribbons through the tall pines. The girls, high on sugar and newfound security, commandeered a box of sidewalk chalk Zach found in the shed, and proceeded to draw the welcome mat of dreams. On the wooden porch, a riot of rainbow stars and smiling stick figures. Zach and Lillian sat on the old porch swing, a companionable silence between them. It's been over a year since they've had more than 2 consecutive nights sleeping in the same place. Lillian said softly, her voice tinged with a poignant sadness. They've had to learn to bloom in the cracks of a very hard life, she added, watching her daughters. True stability, true security. I'm learning it's not about a fancy house or a fat bank account. It's about where love lives, isn't it? Emily used to sit right here. Zach reminisced, his gaze distant, a faint smile playing on his lips. Peanut butter toast crumbs everywhere, telling me elaborate stories about the secret lives of squirrels and the hierarchy of the blue jays. You must miss her terribly, Lillian said, her voice gentle. I do. But it's a good kind of missing now, mostly. For a long, long time, I felt guilty for any moment of peace, any flicker of happiness. Before she left for college, she made me promise, Dad, don't let this place die just because it got too quiet. Keep the good memories alive, but make new ones too. You didn't let it die, Zach. Lillian said, her voice soft but firm. You kept the porch light on. You kept a promise, even if you didn't fully realize to whom. Lillian turned on the swing, her voice hesitant, achingly vulnerable. Zach, I know this is asking too much, far too much, but would it be okay if we stayed? Just a little longer, just until I can get properly back on my feet, find some work, a place. He looked at her, then truly looked at the weary hope etched in her tired blue eyes, the fragile strength in the set of her jaw. He thought of his empty cabin, the silence that had once been a refuge, but now felt like a cage. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Stay, Lillian. Stay as long as you need. This old house hasn't felt this alive, this right in many, many years. Relief so potent it was almost palpable flooded her features. And for the first time, he saw the woman she might have been before grief and hardship had weathered her. That afternoon, while Lillian, resourceful and determined, began making inquiries about local work and meticulously tidied the already neat cabin, Zach took the 3 excited girls down to the stream that gurgled and rushed behind his property. Lucy immediately claimed to see a legendary giant trout she named Henry VIII. Grace, ever the pragmatist, insisted it was merely a large, interesting-looking salamander. Lily, meanwhile, sat on a mossy rock and earnestly asked the rushing water its name, listening intently for an answer. They returned at dusk, cheeks rosy, shoes muddy, and spirits soaring to the unexpected, mouth-watering aroma of beef stew. Lillian, having unearthed forgotten pantry staples, dried herbs, a dusty can of tomatoes, some wizened potatoes, had worked her quiet magic. They ate by the crackling fire, trading terrible knock-knock jokes and silly riddles, their combined laughter echoing through the small cabin, chasing away the last lingering shadows of Zach's long solitude. Later, after the girls were tucked into makeshift beds, giggling and whispering secrets, Zach stepped out onto the porch. The amber light glowed, a steadfast beacon against the deepening twilight. Lillian joined him, wrapped in one of Emily's old soft quilts. You were right, Zach. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the chirping crickets. About the light. It doesn't just bring back the lost ones from the past. Sometimes it helps the ones who are still out there, lost and trying desperately to be found. Funny, isn't it? He said, a wry, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. All these years I thought I was patiently waiting to save someone to fulfill some unspoken debt to Caroline and Andrew. And maybe, Lillian said gently, her shoulder brushing his in the comforting darkness. All along, through all that waiting, you were the one who was slowly, unknowingly being saved. Their eyes met a long, searching look. Not love, perhaps, not yet. But the slow, tentative, hopeful opening of two long-shuttered hearts. Zach found himself venturing into the attic the next morning, a place he usually avoided, filled as it was with poignant memories. He was searching for some old Christmas lights the girls had inexplicably begged for, to make the house sparkle even more for the Mountain Laurel Festival next month. Lucy had declared with authority. The attic smelled of cedar-old paper-dried herbs and the faint, lingering scent of Caroline's favorite lavender sachets. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light piercing through the grimy window. He located a large plastic bin labeled Winter, Emily. Inside, amidst tangled strings of lights, tarnished glass ornaments, a faded, one-antlered felt reindeer, he found a folded piece of notebook paper. Emily's looping, endearingly uneven cursive from when she was just 10 years old. Dear Daddy, it read. I know you miss Mommy and baby Andrew lots. I do too. But when you keep the porch light on every night, it makes me feel like they're still with us somehow, like a warm hug from heaven. And I think maybe it helps other people too. Like maybe someone else is having a sad, lonely night or got lost in the woods. And they see our light, and they know someone cares enough to leave it on. Please keep it on always, Daddy. It's our hope light. Love, Emily. The breath left him in a sudden, painful whoosh. He'd forgotten, completely forgotten this. His wise, sensitive little girl hadn't seen the light as a memorial to grief as he had for so many years. She had seen it as an active beacon of hope, a promise of care for unseen others. Someone like Lillian, someone like Lucy, Grace, and Lily. A hard, tight knot of grief lodged deep inside him for 7 long years, silently, surprisingly, blessedly, began to come undone. He sat there on a dusty trunk, the fragile letter clutched in his hand, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, yet feeling remarkably, blessedly, wonderfully present. Downstairs, he could hear the girls' joyous shrieks and laughter, as they attempted, with much giggling and minor squabbling, to string the newly discovered Christmas lights along the porch railing. Lillian watched them, a genuine, soul-deep maternal smile finally truly reaching her eyes. Zach walked over to her, and without a word showed her Emily's letter. Oh, Zach. Lillian whispered, her eyes wide with awe as she read it. She understood. Even back then, she understood the heart of it all. She always did see things truer, clearer than I did. Zach said, his voice rough with emotion. Lillian, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about being so tired of fighting, of just surviving. I know that kind of soul-deep tired. And I also know what it feels like to finally tentatively exhale and then immediately wonder if you even deserve to feel that relief. Lillian looked away quickly, blinking fast, her composure momentarily threatened. I don't want to push or presume anything, Zach said, his heart thumping. But if you'd ever consider staying longer than just a little while, not as a guest, but properly, for good. She turned back, stunned disbelief, warring with a tremulous, almost unbearable hope in her expressive eyes. You're offering... What exactly are you offering, Zach? A home. He said simply the word, feeling more profound than he'd ever imagined. It's not perfect, Lord knows. It's a bit ramshackle and the plumbing can be temperamental. But it's warm, it's safe, and the porch light's always on. Lillian stared at him for a long moment, then a laugh bubbled up, soft at first, then full and rich, a sound of pure, joyful relief that chased the last shadows from her face. You have absolutely no idea what you're potentially signing up for, Zachary Cole. 3 crayon-wielding, mud-pie-making whirlwinds, and their utterly exhausted, practically destitute mother. I think. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his own eyes. I'm starting to get a rather delightful sense of it, actually. Her eyes shone luminous, with unshed tears. But why, Zach? Why us? Why now? Because Emily's light, that hope light she wrote about. It wasn't just trying to save me from my own darkness. It was actively reaching out. It brought you here. It brought them here. And if that's not a sign from somewhere telling me it's time to say yes to life again, to open the door wide, then I don't know what is. That evening, the old porch blazed, not just with its customary single ember bulb, but with a cheerful, mismatched array of multicolored Christmas lights. Laughter, rich and genuine, spilled from the cabin's open windows into the cool night air. Inside, Zach found himself, to his own surprise, sitting by the fire, a book of fairy tales open in his lap, reading to 3 spellbound little girls. Lillian sat nearby, a mending basket in her lap, ostensibly fixing a tear in Lily's sweater, but mostly watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. But that made his heart feel strangely lighter. Later, as he was in the kitchen, humming softly as he washed the dinner dishes, she came up behind him and said softly, I want to stay, Zach. We all want to stay. But not as a guest, not indefinitely, and certainly not as a charity case. He turned hands dripping soapy water. Then stay as family, Lillian. He said the words, feeling as right and true as the mountains themselves. She stepped forward, then took her cherished, creased ultrasound photo from her purse, and with a decisive little nod, tucked it into a crack on the old wooden refrigerator door right next to Emily's faded, triumphant picture of Trevor the trout. She turned back to him, her eyes radiant, her smile incandescent. We're home, Zach, she whispered. I think we're finally truly home. The sharp, methodical, official-sounding knock on the door came a few days later, mid-morning. Zach was out in his workshop, a converted shed fragrant with sawdust, and possibility clumsily attempting to sand a simple wooden toy box he was building with Lucy and Grace, providing overly enthusiastic and not entirely helpful supervision. Lillian, hands lightly floured from an ambitious attempt at biscuit-making, a recipe from a cookbook Miss Clara had dropped off, opened the front door just as Zach entered from the back, alerted by the unfamiliar sound. A woman in a sensible navy coat, an official-looking laminated ID badge clipped to her practical scarf, stood on the porch. Good afternoon. I'm Marie Thompson with Sierra County Child Protective Services. Zach's stomach clenched into a cold, hard knot. Did someone call you? Lillian whispered, her face draining of all color. Marie Thompson nodded, her expression professionally neutral, but not unkind. We received an anonymous report late yesterday. Allegations regarding children potentially residing in a derelict vehicle, possible neglect. I'm here to conduct an initial wellness check. Her eyes flickered briefly towards the woods, where the broken-down pickup still lay partially hidden. They're not living there anymore, Zach said immediately, stepping instinctively protectively in front of Lillian. They're here with me, in my home. And you are? Marie Thompson asked, her pen poised over a notepad. Zachary Cole. This is my home, ma'am. She noted it down. And your legal relationship to Ms. Martin and the children is? Currently non-existent, legally speaking. Zach admitted. But they are under my roof. They are safe, they are warm, and they are loved. Or Marie Thompson stepped inside her gaze, sweeping the small rustic living room, taking in the crayon drawings, proudly displayed the mismatched but cheerful Christmas lights, still strung up the 3 pairs of small muddy shoes, neatly lined up by the door. The girls, sensing the shift in atmosphere, peeked out from the kitchen doorway, their faces etched with apprehension. "Well, hello there," Marie said, her professional smile softening slightly. "You must be Lucy, Grace, and Lily." She consulted her notes. "May I speak with them privately for a few minutes?" Zach looked at Lillian, whose face was a mask of terror, and gave a small, reassuring nod. He strained to hear from the kitchen, catching snippets. "Feel safe here. Plenty of warm food, a comfy bed to sleep in. Ever feel scared of anyone in this house?" After what felt like an eternity, Marie returned, her expression still largely unreadable. The girls are bright, articulate, and all things considered surprisingly well adjusted. They appear to feel secure and happy here. That's a very positive initial sign. Lillian exhaled a shaky breath, prematurely as it turned out. However, Marie continued, her tone shifting to one of gentle but firm officialdom. "The legalities are complex. Because you're not a licensed foster provider, Mr. Cole and Ms. Martin, at present, you have no verifiable stable housing or independent income. The situation is further complicated by a formal expression of concern lodged with our office just this morning by a Mr. and Mrs. Charles Holbrook, the children's paternal grandparents, I believe. They've expressed serious concerns about Ms. Martin's suitability and have stated their intent to seek emergency custody through the courts. Furthermore," her gaze flickered to Lillian with a touch of sympathy, "Mr. Holbrook provided our office with what purports to be a handwritten journal allegedly belonging to Ms. Martin, which, if authentic, raises some disturbing questions about her past emotional state and decision-making." Lillian went ashen. "A diary? That's impossible. It's a fake. The Holbrooks. They'll stop at nothing. They'll lie. They'll invent anything. Based on the grandparents' formal petition and the material presented," Marie stated, her voice conveying a hint of regret, but also unwavering professional duty, "I will unfortunately need to file a report recommending a temporary intervention order with the family court. If Ms. Martin cannot demonstrate verifiable stable housing and sustainable income very rapidly, and if the Holbrooks aggressively press their claim with their legal resources, the children may regrettably need to be temporarily placed in licensed foster care pending a full hearing." "No." Lillian breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "Not now. We just got here. We finally felt safe. A court hearing will likely be scheduled within the week, perhaps sooner, given the Holbrooks' pressure," Marie said, gathering her papers. "Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook are, as you know, wealthy and highly influential in this region. Their attorney is known for his aggressive tactics." Just before Marie left, an unmarked envelope had been delivered by a local courier. Lillian had opened it to find a single sheet of plain paper with a typed, unsigned message. "Charles will stop at nothing. He is a master of manipulation and deceit. Forgive me for my weakness. Be brave for David's precious girls. A faint hope." Lillian had stared at it, bewildered and unsettled, unsure of its origin or meaning. But a new sliver of unease had joined her existing fear. As if summoned by the very mention of their name, a black, gleaming luxury sedan crunched aggressively onto the gravel driveway. Charles Holbrook, portly, impeccably dressed, and radiating an aura of arrogant self-importance, marched onto the porch, his wife Alara, a pale, nervous shadow, trailing hesitantly behind him. "Martin." Holbrook boomed, his voice disdainful, completely ignoring Zach and Marie Thompson. "One last chance. An act of generosity on our part. Sign over the girls. We'll provide everything for them. The best schools close opportunities you could never dream of. You can disappear, start over somewhere else. You cannot offer them anything but continued poverty and instability, Lillian. We will give them the world they deserve. His eyes were chips of cold, hard granite. Lillian, drawing strength from some hidden wellspring, stepped resolutely before her daughters, who had crept back into the room. They are my daughters, Mr. Holbrook. They are not commodities to be bought or sold. Holbrook sneered a contemptuous twist of his lips. Don't be a sentimental fool, woman. This recluse. He gestured dismissively at Zach in the humble cabin. Offers them nothing but more of the same deprivation. We have concrete evidence of your ongoing instability, your unfitness. We will win in court, Lillian. We always do. Zach stepped forward, then a solid, unmovable barrier between the aggressive man and the fragile family. You will leave my property, Holbrook. He said, his voice low and dangerously calm. And you will not come back uninvited. Holbrook's eyes narrowed into slits of fury, but something in Zach's quiet intensity, perhaps, or Marie Thompson's official presence, made him pause. He spun on his heel. You'll regret this interference, Cole. And you, Lillian, will lose everything. The sedan roared back down the drive, spitting gravel. After they had gone and Marie Thompson had departed with a final, sympathetic but non-committal glance, Lillian sank onto the porch swing, her body trembling. I should have known. I should have run further, faster. Zach crouched beside her gently, taking her cold, shaking hands in his. Lillian, you didn't ask for this trouble to find you. You were asking for a glimmer of hope. And hope, darlin', hope always makes a bit of noise when it shows up. But what if I lose them, Zach? After all this, what if they take my babies? He squeezed her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. Then we fight, Lillian. Together. They are not taking your girls. I promise you that. That night, the cabin buzzed with a nervous, determined energy. Zach, his jaw set, drafted a formal statement of support detailing his observations of Lillian's loving care and the girls' well-being. Lillian, finding a new reserve of strength, fueled by righteous anger, contacted past employers, school principals. An old principal from a school district down south remembered her warmly praising her dedication and skill. By midnight, fueled by coffee and fierce determination, they had built more than just a nascent legal defense. They had begun to assemble the narrative of a family forged by shared adversity choice and a burgeoning, undeniable love. Before collapsing into Emily's bed, Lillian paused on the porch, staring into the darkness. Marie, she could come back tomorrow, with official papers, with the police. She might, Zach said, joining her by the rail, his presence a solid comfort. But we'll be ready for whatever comes. You don't have to do this, Zach. This isn't your fight. Yes, Lillian, he said, turning to look at her, his gaze unwavering in the dim glow of the Christmas lights. Yes, it is. Someone a long time ago left their light on for me. Now it's my turn. For you. For them. The storm hit before dawn, not a gentle rain this time, but a raging, violent beast. Wind slammed against the small cabin with hurricane force, rattling windows and shrieking through the ancient pines like a tormented spirit. Suddenly, with a deafening crack, like artillery fire, a massive oak branch, thick as a man's torso, crashed through the large picture window in the living room, showering the interior with razor-sharp shards of glass and icy rain. The curtains billowed wildly inwards. Rain and wind immediately began to pool on the wooden floor. Lillian appeared in the doorway, her face pale, a whimpering Lily clutched in her arms. Lucy and Grace followed close behind, eyes wide with terror. Cal the cat, thoroughly spooked, darted through the shattered window and into the maelstrom outside. Cal, no. Lily cried, trying to squirm free and follow. "Lily, no, stay here," Lillian shrieked, pulling her back. "Everyone get over by the fireplace, away from the windows," Zach yelled over the roar. He battled his way out to the woodshed, returning moments later, soaked to the bone, shivering, but clutching precious sheets of plywood and a hammer. Together, he and Lillian, working frantically in the dim, chaotic light, managed to board up the gaping, jagged hole. Then a new terrified scream from Lily near the back door. Cal's hurt. I saw him out by the creek." She'd slipped out while they were focused on the window. "Lily!" Lillian shrieked, her heart leaping into her throat. "Stay here with the girls," Zach yelled, grabbing a heavy-duty flashlight and plunging out into the tempest, the wind tearing at him. Lillian, bundling a terrified Lucy and Grace into warmer jackets, hesitated for only a second before following him into the furious night. The usually gentle stream behind the cabin was now a roaring, muddy, debris-choked torrent. "Lily!" Zach bellowed, his voice barely audible above the storm. He swept the flashlight beam wildly, then a flash of pink pajama fabric near the swollen, rapidly collapsing creek bank. Lily was clinging desperately to an exposed tree root, her small face stark white with fear. Cal was cowering beside her, a heavy fallen branch pinning her small leg. An ancient towering pine directly above them groaned ominously, its roots clearly compromised by the saturated earth threatening to topple at any moment. Zach reached her in seconds, frantically heaving at the heavy branch. Lillian arrived, breathless, adding her strength to his. They wrenched Lily's leg free just as a large section of the bank beneath them gave way, with a sickening slurp. Zach grabbed Lily under one arm, Cal under the other, while Lillian clutched his free arm with a desperate grip. They scrambled, slipped, and clawed their way up the slick, muddy incline, the greedy creek snapping at their heels. The path back towards the cabin was now a treacherous morass of mud and fallen debris blocked by another downed tree. Their only visible escape route was a rickety old wooden footbridge further downstream, which looked perilously close to giving way under the torrent. It was a terrifying gamble, their only chance to cross before being completely trapped by the raging water. Zach made a split-second life-or-death decision. Hold on tight. He half-carried, half-dragged them across the swaying, groaning, splintering planks, the wood protesting under their weight, just as a large section behind them tore free and was swept away by the current. Then, through the driving rain and howling wind, they saw it. The porch light, their little collection of Christmas lights, a faint but blessedly unwavering beacon of amber and colored glows. Guided by its hopeful signal, they stumbled back towards the cabin, bruised, bleeding, soaked, and shivering violently, but miraculously, blessedly together. Lily was scraped and terrified, but not seriously injured. Cal was traumatized, but to everyone's relief, physically unharmed. Back inside, the girls huddled by the fire, wrapped in every dry blanket Zach possessed. Lillian gently, tenderly cleaned Zach's bleeding, scraped knuckles with a damp cloth, her eyes, when they met his, filled with a potent, undeniable mixture of overwhelming love, profound gratitude, and bone-deep relief. Later, when the storm had somewhat abated, Zach and the girls, in an act of defiance and healing, turned the stark plywood panel covering the broken window into a storm recovery mural. A chaotic but joyful explosion of smiling suns, blooming flowers, and triumphant stick figures huddled under a massive rainbow umbrella. Miss Clara, bless her insightful heart, arrived the next day, navigating downed branches and muddy roads, bearing a pot of her famous hearty beef stew and a comforting dose of her homespun wisdom. Support began to pour in from the small, tight-knit mountain community folks who'd heard about the family staying with Old Man Cole, and the damage from the storm bags of groceries left on the porch, warm winter coats, for the girls' stacks of children's books, even an anonymous brand-new bunk bed delivered by a bewildered local furniture store owner. A surprising job offer for Lillian materialized from a Mrs. Clean, the mother of one of Lillian's former students from years ago, now running a small but thriving daycare in the nearby town. The cabin, once defined by its profound silence, was now thrumming with life, laughter, and the comforting hum of human connection. The night before the devastating storm, in a moment of quiet intimacy after the girls were asleep, Lillian had found Emily's attic letter on Zach's bedside table and read it aloud, her voice thick with emotion. She understood it all even then. Lillian had marveled. I thought I was just keeping that light on for ghosts for Caroline and Andrew. Zach confessed, his own voice raw. But now I see it. All this time it was for the living too. It was for you. For these incredible girls. The courtroom was smaller, older than Lillian had imagined, the dark wood paneling polished smooth by time, smelling faintly of aged wood, old legal texts and dust motes dancing in the bright shafts of morning sunlight, slanting through the tall windows. Lillian, wearing a simple borrowed navy dress that Miss Clara had insisted was respectable and hopeful, sat ramrod straight beside Zach, his hand resting reassuringly on hers. The girls, scrubbed, brushed, and adorned with new ribbons in their hair, another gift from Miss Clara, sat quietly on the bench directly behind them, looking small and solemn. Marie Thompson entered, offered Lillian and Zach a small, almost imperceptible nod, her professional expression now softened by what looked like cautious hopefulness. Across the aisle, Charles and Alara Holbrook sat with their hawk-faced, expensive-looking lawyer, a portrait of grim determination and entitlement. Judge Marion Holloway, a woman with intelligent, slate-gray eyes and an air of no-nonsense compassion, shuffled a stack of papers on her bench. Ms. Lillian Martin. She began, her voice clear and authoritative. You are here today, seeking to retain full legal custody of your 3 minor daughters, Lucy Grace and Lily Martin, and you propose to reside with them at the home of Mr. Zachary Cole. Is that correct? Lillian stood, her legs trembling slightly, but her voice surprisingly clear and firm. Yes, Your Honor. That is correct. Mr. Cole has given us more than just shelter. He has given us a true home, a sanctuary. The judge's gaze shifted to Zach. Mr. Cole, you are not a blood relative of these children, I understand. No, ma'am, I am not. Zach rose, his tall frame filling the space beside Lillian. But, with the court's permission, Your Honor, I would very much like to be. A quiet stir rippled through the small courtroom. The Holbrooks scowled. Their lawyer leaned forward. Could you clarify that statement for the court, Mr. Cole? Judge Holloway asked, an eyebrow slightly raised. Your Honor, Zach began, his voice steady. I wish to formally file a petition for joint legal guardianship of Lucy Grace and Lily Martin, and he paused, turning to meet Lillian's incredulous, tear-filled gaze. I also wish to state my unequivocal intent to marry Ms. Lillian Martin should she do me the honor of accepting. Lillian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears now openly streaming down her face. Lucy behind them beamed, nudging Grace excitedly. Well, Mr. Cole, Judge Holloway said, a hint of amused surprise in her tone. That is highly unorthodox, to say the least, in a proceeding of this nature. Zach allowed himself a small, genuine smile. So was a grieving man, keeping his porch light burning steadfastly for 7 long years, Your Honor, without truly knowing who or what he was waiting for. Until now. Marie Thompson stepped forward, holding a slim file. Your Honor, if I may. In my professional capacity, I have rarely witnessed children thrive so remarkably and so quickly in a new environment. What I have observed at Mr. Cole's residence is not a temporary arrangement, but the forging of a true, loving, and resilient family unit. Additionally, she glanced at a new document she was holding. We received a sworn affidavit this morning quite unexpectedly from Mr. Alistair Weston of the Ridgemont estate. It appears Mr. Weston has had past business dealings with Mr. Holbrook. The affidavit details certain financial and ethical irregularities concerning Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook's business operations, including potential violations directly related to the crane accident that tragically killed Mr. David Martin, the children's father. Mr. Weston states he feels a profound moral obligation to bring these previously suppressed facts to light. The Holbrooks went visibly pale. Their lawyer began to sputter incoherently. Then, just as things seemed bleakest for the Holbrooks, a new figure unexpectedly requested to speak. Sarah Jenkins, a former teaching colleague of Lillian's from years back, whom Lillian had managed to contact. "Your Honor." Sarah said, her voice clear and steady. Years ago, shortly after David Martin's death, when Lillian was pregnant and utterly destitute, Mr. Charles Holbrook approached her. He offered her a substantial monthly sum of money enough to live comfortably. The only condition was that she sign away all parental rights to her then unborn daughters, effectively disappearing from their lives. She was desperate, grieving with nothing. But she refused. She chose abject poverty and uncertainty over abandoning her children. The so-called diary they speak of. Sarah's eyes flashed. "I was with Lillian when she painstakingly typed out her job applications and her pleas for assistance. That diary is almost certainly a cruel fabrication designed to paint her as unstable for the very act of refusing to sell her children." The Holbrooks looked aghast at this unexpected and devastating betrayal of their carefully constructed malicious narrative. At that moment, the folded worn letter from Caroline, which Emily had found tucked in an old photo album, while Zach was frantically searching for documents to help Lillian and had pressed into his hand just before they left for court, fell from his jacket pocket. He bent to pick it up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My late wife, Caroline. She wrote this letter to me many years ago. She was urging me even then to find a way to open my heart again, to let the light be for more than just grief and memory." He unfolded it, his hand trembling slightly, and read a line, his voice choking. "Our porch light, my dearest Zach, was always for those we loved and lost. But it was also meant to be a beacon for those who might yet find their way to us, to our life, to our love. Open your heart wide, my love, when it feels right, and let the light shine for them too." Judge Holloway looked from a now composed Marie Thompson to a radiant, tearful Lillian, to the crumbling facade of the Holbrooks. "Ms. Martin," the judge said, her voice now considerably warmer, "do you concur with Mr. Cole's rather heartfelt and publicly declared proposal?" Lillian locked eyes with Zach, her heart swelling with a love so profound it was almost painful. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear despite the joyful tears streaming down her face. "With all my heart, yes." Suddenly, the courtroom doors at the back opened. Elara Holbrook stood there, trembling, her face a mask of anguish. "Elara, sit down this instant." Charles hissed, his face contorted with fury. "No, Charles." Her voice, though it trembled, resonated with a newfound surprising strength. "No more. David loved Lillian. He chose her. These beautiful girls are his legacy, his heart. They belong with their mother and with this good, kind man who has so clearly opened his home and his heart to them. My husband's evidence. It was twisted, manipulated, lies. I can no longer in good conscience be party to his cruelty, his obsession." She turned her gaze to Lillian, tears now flowing freely down her own cheeks. "Lillian, can you ever forgive me?" Judge Holloway smiled, a genuinely warm, humane smile. "Well then, pending a satisfactory home evaluation, which I trust Ms. Thompson will expedite, and the presentation of a marriage certificate in due course, I grant provisional approval for this unique and frankly inspiring arrangement. Frankly, Mr. Cole, Ms. Martin. She added, her eyes twinkling. It seems to me this remarkable, resilient family rewrote their own happy ending long before they stepped into my courtroom today. Case conditionally resolved in favor of Ms. Martin and Mr. Cole. That evening, the little cabin on the mountain burst at the seams with joyful chaos. Emily, having driven up from college at breakneck speed after a cryptic but ecstatic call from her father, arrived bearing armfuls of wildflowers and a Polaroid camera, immediately starting to document the joyous occasion. Miss Clara appeared with a massive chocolate cake, which Lucy promptly and exuberantly decorated with an entire bag of gummy bears. The newly assembled bunk beds were made up with bright, cheerful quilts. Later, under the soft, welcoming glow of the porch light and the twinkling Christmas lights, Zach, with trembling hands, took out a small, worn, velvet box. "Lillian, my love," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "This isn't a rescue, not anymore. For any of us. It feels more like a return. A return to what, Zach?" She whispered, her eyes luminous. "To the life, the love, the family you were always meant to have. With people who will cherish you, all of you, always." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded satin, was a simple, elegant gold band, unmistakably Caroline's wedding ring. She would want this, Lil. For us. "Yes, Zach," she whispered, her voice catching. 100,000 times, yes. The girls who had been peeking from the doorway cheered loud enough to wake the owls. Neighbors, drawn by the unusual sounds of revelry, began to call, wondering about the joyous noise erupting from Old Man Cole's usually quiet cabin. A week later, a handwritten note arrived on fine parchment, delivered by a discreet messenger from the Ridgemont estate. "Dear Mr. Cole and Ms. Martin, your courage and the undeniable truth of your family's love have reminded me what real wealth, real inheritance truly looks like. Thank you. I hope someday I can learn to be someone's porch light, too. With deepest admiration, A.W." Zach carefully placed it in the old wooden box, with Caroline's baby blanket, Emily's childhood letter, and Lillian's precious worn ultrasound photo. Past, present, and future coexisting in perfect, poignant harmony. At the official adoption hearing several months later, a formality by then, Lucy confidently declared to the beaming judge that Zach made the bestest, most fluffiest pancakes in the whole entire universe. Grace shyly added that he was very good at fixing all sorts of broken things, even sometimes broken feelings. Lily, clutching a small, hand-drawn picture of their blended family, simply whispered to the judge, "Mr. Zach tells all the scary monsters under the bed to go away, and they always listen." The judge signed the final forms with a flourish and a broad smile. Outside the courthouse, Lily held up a large crayon-adorned sign she'd painstakingly made. "We got adopted and engaged, our mama and Zach. Not us all on the same day. Best day ever." Their path to becoming a family wasn't traditional, not by any stretch of the imagination. But it was wonderfully, authentically, profoundly real. That night, Zach stood on the porch, the familiar amber light casting a warm glow. The light, once a solitary, grief-stricken memorial, was now their shared radiant monument to resilience, unwavering hope, extraordinary courage, and a love that had weathered impossible storms. He whispered a quiet "thank you" into the cool night air. To Caroline for her enduring love and wisdom, to Emily for her childhood insight, to Miss Clara for her quiet support, to the little mountain town for its unexpected embrace, and most of all, to the storm-tossed strangers who had stumbled into his life and become his miraculous, cherished family. The screen door creaked open behind him. Laughter, warm and musical, swelled from within the cabin. For the first time in 7 long, aching years, Zachary Cole stepped inside, moving purposefully towards the warmth, towards the light, towards his family, without looking back, without hesitation. The light in his heart and the light in his home, he knew with absolute certainty, would always, always be on. Years later, the porch light on the little mountain cabin still glowed a steadfast beacon. Neighbors, new and old, often drove by slowly just to see it shining. Some unfamiliar with the true story whispered romanticized tales of a lost child found or a heartbroken lover eternally waiting. Those who knew those who had witnessed the miracle unfold simply smiled and understood it was about an unwavering welcome. About hope, about love finding a way. The girls blossomed each in her own unique, wonderful way. Lucy, her fiery spirit channeled into her art, became a renowned sculptor whose work was celebrated for its raw, emotional power. Grace, her meticulous nature and keen intellect, finding its perfect expression, became a brilliant, respected meteorologist chasing storms with data instead of from them. Lily, still occasionally found talking to the stars, insisted each celestial body had its own distinct and often rather opinionated personality, and became a beloved children's author, her stories filled with whimsy and wonder. Lillian's small preschool classroom, the Sunbeam, became a cherished haven of learning and laughter for the children of the community. Zach continued to mend and build, rarely charging more than a thank you and a plate of cookies, his workshop a place of quiet creation and gentle wisdom. Pies, casseroles, and heartfelt thank you notes frequently and mysteriously appeared on his porch. One cool summer evening, a young man clearly lost his car. Broken down eyes filled with a familiar desperation knocked tentatively on the door. "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I heard in town someone said your light is always on." Zach smiled a kind, welcoming smile that reached his eyes. "It sure is, son. Come on in. Looks like you could use a hot meal and a friendly face." Another place was quickly set at the bustling kitchen table. The girls home for a summer visit knew this dance by heart. Their home was more than a house. It was a harbor. Emily, now a successful novelist, her own books exploring themes of loss, hope, and unexpected connection, sat with Zach on the porch swing one evening, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight. "You did it, Dad," she said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "What exactly did I do, Em?" He asked, his arm around her. "You kept the promise. To Mom, to me, to yourself. You let life in all its messy, glorious unpredictability back in. No, sweet girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You with that precious childhood letter you lit the very first match." Emily pointed to the small, hand-painted sign the girls had made years ago, now weathered but still legible, hanging proudly next to the porch light. "This light brought us all home. And they," she said, her gesture encompassing Lillian and her now-grown sisters, bustling inside their laughter, spilling out. "They, Dad, they built the unquenchable, ever-burning fire." Zach and Lillian finally married in their own rambling backyard under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights strung between the sturdy branches of the ancient dogwood tree Caroline herself had planted decades ago. Instead of traditional vows, they read letters to each other. Zach's, his voice choked with emotion, included, "You came to me in the rain." Lillian, a storm-tossed, beautiful angel with 3 even more precious angels in tow. "I thought I was leaving the light on for ghosts. But all along, my love, I was leaving it on for you. For us." For the ceremony, Lillian carried a small posy of wildflowers, and tucked into it was a tiny silver locket, Caroline's, which Zach had found in the attic, a silent, beautiful acknowledgement of all the love that had shaped their journey. Years passed. Seasons turned, painting the mountains in an ever-changing palette of colors. The light on the porch never dimmed. Strangers, weary travelers, souls adrift, still occasionally knocked on their door, drawn by its unwavering glow and by the persistent, hopeful hum of belonging that seemed to emanate from the very timbers of the little cabin. One glorious spring morning, Lucy, home for a visit, found Zach sitting quietly on the porch, his eyes closed, the early sun warm on his weathered face, a contented smile playing on his lips. "Dad, you okay?" He opened one eye, the smile widening. "Never been better, kiddo. Not going anywhere. Just thinking how unbelievably, wonderfully lucky I am. That the beautiful souls I lost so long ago, somehow in their own way, helped me find all of you." Lucy leaned her head on his strong shoulder, a comfortable, familiar gesture. As the sun climbed higher, scattering dazzling rainbows through the porch light's old hand-blown glass shade, Zach whispered the quiet, steady mantra of his soul. "The light's still on. It's always on. And someone is always coming home." Just then, a beat-up, sputtering minivan, packed to the gills with instruments and weary-looking young musicians, pulled hesitantly into the driveway. Their tired, wary expressions softened almost immediately as they blinked towards the steadfast, welcoming light. And then, at the tall, silver-haired man, rising from the porch swing, his hand raised in a warm, friendly wave. The light indeed was always on, and home in this extraordinary, beautifully ordinary place was always waiting.